Hi, I'm Martin Popoff. I'm the author of Queen Album by Album, and you're watching Mr. Media.
Over the last year, every time I saw a trailer for the film Bohemian Rhapsody, I had one thought. Please, please don't suck. I hadn't realized that decades after Queen was a staple of my high school and college years, and long after charismatic lead singer Freddie Mercury had left the stage, that I still loved their music and cared that their legacy be treated with respect. When I saw the movie, I was not only relieved, I was exhilarated. Bohemian Rhapsody is everything I want to see when I plunk down $12 to see a film in a real movie theater. It's big, it's loud, it's bombastic, and it's even emotional. Or, as my 22-year-old son said afterward, after seeing that movie, why would anyone listen to music that isn't by Queen? So today, we're going to deep dive into the Queen catalog of 15 original studio releases. Our guide is rock critic and rock historian Martin Popoff, author of Queen Album by Album. In the book, he engages a number of experienced fellow writers, including Stephen Dalton and former Mr. Media guest Richie Unterberger, plus a few musicians you might have heard of, Darius Rucker of Hootie and the Blowfish, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, and yes, the Sir Paul McCartney of the Beatles and Wings. It's quite a conversation. Martin Popoff, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob. This is very cool.
Delighted to have you here. Love the backdrop for people who are getting to watch the video. Maybe a little later we'll have Martin show us around what's behind him. But I got to start with, why Queen? Was this a naked commercial grab with the movie due out? Not that there's anything at all wrong with that.
No, it actually started a long, long time ago, and this is actually the fifth in a series of these books. We did the first one on Rush, we did AC/DC, we did Pink Floyd, we did Iron Maiden. It just happened to come out literally like the week or two that the movie came out, but obviously it's been a work in progress for about a year or so. I think when we started there were rumblings that there would be a movie, but it's almost like, who cares? You almost don't expect it to even come out, there being a movie. So it was just a band that the publisher figured, they have some legs. They're a world band, so the publishers often think about, where will this book sell? Is it just an American experience? Will it sell around the world? So it just quickly made it through the the roadblocks to get approved, and yeah, here we are. We've got one on Queen.
So you've done all 5 in the series?
Yes. I believe Richie started the series with the Bob Dylan one. But after that, I've done every one. I don't think there's been one that I haven't done.
I think I talked to Richie about his Bob Marley book.
Okay.
In the past year, I'm thinking.
But it wasn't an album by album, I don't think, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Really well done book. I'm just.
Oh yeah.
People if you folks didn't see that interview or hear that interview, you should go look it up in the archives. Really interesting. Just a lot of great stuff that you can learn about Marley in that book. But here we're talking about Queen today. Now tell me a little about the format of the book, because obviously this is the first in the series that I've seen. It's very unique. Can you describe a little bit of how it's come about, and has it evolved since the first of the 5?
Yeah, it hasn't really evolved. They've stayed pretty consistent. The one thing that's changed is the number of contributors. I'll get to that in a minute. But basically the format is we're looking at every single studio album by a band. So we had to pick bands where that kind of made sense. You didn't want too many or too few or too many albums people didn't care about. So this is kind of the perfect amount of albums. So it's every studio album, no live albums, no compilations. And essentially I write a pretty long intro to the whole situation. And then what it is it's basically a Q&A interview with 2 to 3, and in some cases 4. I don't know if we used 4 in this one at all, but in the Pink Floyd, I think we had 4 on 1 or 2 of them. But an average of 2 to 3 people basically being interrogated. They had to go away and do a little bit of homework, hopefully in most cases. So it's just a long sort of Q&A deep dive into each studio album and then on to the next one. And then, of course, there's all sorts of great pictures and rarities and memorabilia shots and live shots. This publisher does a great job of that kind of thing throughout the whole thing. So it's full color throughout, hardcover, cool little 7 by 10-ish format, I think it is. But yeah, it's just a bunch of sort of, experts and, celebrities, and in this case, one pretty big celebrity, all sort of involved in, you have to be a pretty big fan of the band. And then it's just a deep analysis of each studio album.
Yeah, now I regret I didn't mention in the introduction, the art in the book is spectacular. I mean, the concert photos, the album photos, even what I always enjoy is the backstage passes that have been reproduced. Because those tend to be the more racy, always for every band. They always try to get away with stuff. There's the fat bottom girls on the bicycle races. There's all kinds of great stuff. But yeah, okay. Let's just jump ahead to the elephant in the room. What on earth is Paul McCartney doing in this book? How did that come about?
That was a funny story. So basically, I just put the ask out. I have a nice little letter, and I put the ask out all over the place. And a lot of people don't respond at all. And then you get a few, and then you start slotting them in and all this stuff. So I had finished the book completely, and I had turned it in. And all of a sudden, I get an email saying, very nice, courteous email. Oh, Paul McCartney has agreed to talk to you for your Queen book. Can we work on setting that up? And I was just floored. And stop the presses. We are going to fit Paul in here somewhere. So basically, I got politely stood up a couple times, and time went on, and it only took 10 days, a couple of weeks at that point. And then basically it was on Friday afternoon at, I think 2:00 on a Friday. Paul's going to call you. He called from the car. He was driving. He's like, oh, Martin, I usually have a driver, but I'm driving, so I'm a little distracted. So he was driving from the studio to home. So it was him doing an interview as he was driving home. And, I didn't want to keep him too long. And, I politely asked him, can I ask you a few other things? And we just kept going. And I didn't keep him that long. I didn't want to have him ticked off that I did keep him too long. But he was like, oh, Martin, you got me. I'm a captive audience here. And he's like, driving up a little country road and saying, all right, love, back up. So he's like, little driving, little dramas along the way. But no, he was super nice guy. And right on time and all that stuff, and we just had a lovely chat about Queen. Where I obviously he wasn't the kind of guy who was going to go do your homework, and you've got to talk for 45 minutes on one studio album, blah blah blah. So it was more somewhat generalities, but he knew the band and he had some nice stories, and I have a feeling that part of wanting to do this was him and Brian May share animal rights cause, contribution and work. So I think, and they were on the same record label, more or less, right? So yeah, there's some familiarity and overlap there. But yeah, I was obviously completely delighted to have Sir Paul in there. That was definitely a feather in the cap.
Have you interviewed him before?
No,
oh,
no.
Wow.
He's way above my food chain. That's for sure. Well, I've interviewed a lot of pretty big guys, but I mean, normally it's in the heavy metal world. I do a lot of heavy metal stuff, right? So generally getting guys of that's the top stature period. I don't think, I always have this debate with people, who's the biggest living rock star? And Paul McCartney, I think, is the answer. So, but yeah, he's several levels above who I usually normally get to talk to.
When you found out that he was in the car and driving himself, was there a little fear in the back of your head? I don't want to be mentioned in an obituary where Paul McCartney drives off a cliff. And he was in conversation with rock critic Martin Popoff at the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. But it was a nice, clear line, and he was fine, and he seemed pretty relaxed. So yeah, it was a good conversation.
And it's funny you mentioned Brian May, because I was thinking about it, that it would just seem that he would probably have more in common, more comfort, more interest in Brian May over Freddie Mercury. I don't know why I thought that. It was just an observation on my part, but it just seemed like he would connect more to Brian May as a songwriter and as a guitarist.
Yeah, but I think it is more so their charitable causes. That's the big thing. But Brian is a guitarist and Paul's a guitarist too, and Paul obviously is a bass player too. So he had a couple things to say about John Deacon as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Freddie hasn't been with us for 25. What is it? 26. Died what? 1991.
27, almost 28 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so quite a while. So, it's funny as time goes on. Who knows? I'm not sure if he ever even met Freddie. I didn't ask him that. But it's very possible that no, because these rock stars, I'm often kind of surprised when rock stars haven't met other people, but they say, hey, we're always working at the same time. We may see each other and wave hi at a studio or something, but a lot of these guys don't know each other.
Mm. Well, so that is the second most humanizing moment I've encountered then with having to do with Paul McCartney this past year. Of course, his carpool karaoke with James Corden. I don't know if you saw it, but that was an astonishing.
Yeah.
Everyone I run into, I still say, "Have you seen that?" Because you don't know Paul McCartney until you've seen that. There's just
I think I've seen that 5, 6, 7 times. Yeah.
It's amazing and we'll get back to Queen, but it's amazing the run that he's had at so late in his career of just continuing to just top himself. It's really amazing. Okay, so Paul. Well, let's stay with Paul one more minute. What insight did Paul offer, or comments did Paul offer that made you go what, or made you think, that's interesting? I hadn't thought of that, if at all.
Well, that's cool. I kind of drew a comparison to stay in familiar territory, and I said, we talked about rocking out. Like Queen has some very heavy songs, right? And so I sort of, drew a parallel to Helter Skelter, and he talked to me a little bit about, rocking out, how great it is to, hit that fuzz pedal, have a guitar on, and hit that fuzz pedal in a sound check and stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. Paul the Rocker, right? But he also had a story about how they hired a Queen tribute band in Japan for his wife's birthday called Gween. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, and there was a story about his cousin, I believe, in there turning him on to Queen at one point. And then, yeah, we talked a little about the other thing was a little bit about being on Parlophone and being on kind of like a classic traditional label. So I kind of tried to draw that comparison as well, because of course I was nervous as heck.
Completely understandable.
Yeah.
I've been in those shoes. I understand. And there's some people that, as cool as you want to be to interview them, it's still Sir Paul McCartney. It's whoever. And the other two musicians that are in the book are interesting and completely different than Paul McCartney. At the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, and somewhere in between the continuum of those guys is Darius Rucker, who's of course been out on his own for years, but best known still for Hootie and the Blowfish. How do those guys get involved? Where do they fit in?
Well, Darius was just a guy that said yes. I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. I wanted to spread it around a little and have some people that were a little non-obvious. And he's kind of interesting because he was in this massive diamond selling band, and then he became like a country star. It's quite bizarre, right? But he consented to do it. And again, another guy I didn't press and say do a fair bit of homework. So we kept things pretty general. And Dee is hilarious. I mean, I know Dee, and I've interviewed him many times, and like he says, yeah, I wrote a book called Who Invented Heavy Metal, right? And we've talked about that a little bit, because he says he's patient zero for heavy metal, because he was there buying every single record from the birth of heavy metal, roughly 69 into 1970 on. And he tells a hilarious story about being a Queen fan and seeing them in New York City or wherever close by there on, I think it was the Queen 2 tour, and that's the album he talked about. And he was quite knowledgeable without having to really make him do much homework at all. But he mentions being this, tall, geeky guy with massive hair, just screaming his head off the whole time because, when Queen came to town, at that point in 74, they would have been like, who are these idiots, right? No one knew who they were kind of thing. And they're playing this very ambitious music on stage, and they're probably the backup band or whatever. I believe they were backing up Mott the Hoople. But, he knew Queen head to toe, and he was up there screaming, and he swears, Brian May looked at him and sort of said, who is that idiot up there? Kind of thing, right? So, yeah, he loves Queen. He, and he, we talked a little bit about vocals and how in the early days he was more of a Robert Plant kind of vocalist rather than the vocal fry kind of rough voice vocalist that he became famous for. But no, Dee is just a massive music fan. He's a great interview. He's an enthusiastic guy. And he just said yes right away. Like, hell yeah, I'll talk about Queen. I love Queen. So.
Well, most people, I think, this is your area of expertise, so you stop me if I get this wrong. Most people probably think of Dee mostly for We're Not Gonna Take It, and they had that one huge song. They don't know anything. I mean, as I recall, he'd been kicking around clubs with the band for years before they got their big break. It wasn't like he was an overnight success by any means.
Yeah, and that success was short-lived. It was fast, it was meteoric, but it was short-lived. They had a couple of anthems, I Wanna Rock as well. But that album, I think, did 4 times platinum. And the one before it is gold or whatever, and the one after is platinum. So they did pretty well, but then he kind of went away. He tried some other band situations that didn't quite work out, but he's such an enthusiastic guy that he's built himself into such an incredible band. He kept bringing Twisted Sister back, but one of the oddities with that band is they never made another record after they broke up, but they kept coming back for tours and things. But he became a movie guy and a reality TV guy. So everybody knows Dee. I was actually at a convention. I had a table of books and I was signing things in that. But it was him, Peter Criss, Lita Ford, and just people lining up for the paid autograph situation. All day, and all the next day. So people loved Dee. But you're right. He Twisted Sister basically started around 74, and they didn't really, their first album is 81, 82, 83. It's the third album where they make it. But yeah, he was basically a clubbing musician all around New York for all that time. So yeah, massive music fan for sure.
I remember seeing them on their big tour when they went out and they toured the albums. For the life of me, I can't remember if I interviewed him or not on that tour. So my son asked me the other day, did I ever interview anybody in Queen? And I had to stop and think about it. Because I honestly, I've gotten so old, I guess. I can't remember everybody I've interviewed at this point. Yeah. And I kept thinking, I don't think I have. And then just by coincidence, we saw that I'm in the Tampa Bay area on the west coast of Florida. And there was an announcement like yesterday that apparently Queen with Adam Lambert is going to tour here in August of 2019. And the newspaper made a point of saying it was the first time that any iteration of Queen had ever come here. For some reason, all the years that Queen toured, they never came to this part of Florida, even though it was Central Florida, the Stones, Prince. A lot of bands would start their tours here because it was set up well for that. Anyway, so they I think they sort of broke up in 81, 82. They got back together for Live Aid in 85. I was doing music interviews and music criticism from 82 to 86. So once I saw that, I said, no, I guess I never did. And also, I don't think I ever saw them live, which I'm very disappointed to realize that now. That was another thing I couldn't remember. Anyway, so you had a great, you shared Dee Snider's story about thinking that Brian May had seen him and thought, who is that crazy bastard? What about Darius? What was any insight, any thoughts particularly from him?
Not really. He just treated it more as this is a band that can teach you a lot of things as a band. I mean, I think he just was appreciative of the songwriting and stuff, but nothing I can quite remember off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I've done it.
All right. Now you also have this all-star group of rock critics and writers. Stephen Dalton, I actually didn't look. I'm thinking his experience with Rolling Stone. If I'm not correct.
He's from the UK. I think it's Enemy that he spent a lot of time at.
Oh, okay, all right. And then Richie Unterberger, I mentioned, has been on the show. How did you choose? How did you get these particular group of guys? And I'm only mentioning two by name. Feel free to drop some other names.
Yeah.
But why this particular group for this?
Well, I think just to sort of speak in general terms and not specifically about the guys. I mean, the whole idea is to have a mix of people who are going to bring different perspectives. So yeah, you want the rock stars, you want the writers. In the Queen's book case, we definitely wanted some British people because Queen is probably the second biggest band in Britain or ever to come from Britain, sort of thing. So we wanted a British perspective. So yeah, we have British critics, American critics, British musicians. So you want that mix. Some super fans, you want that kind of thing going. There's people who've written things on Queen. There's semi-insiders. There's Reinhold Mack, of course, in there. Jim Jenkins, who knows a fair bit about the band. He's a bit of an insider, works with the fan club. Of course, we've got a couple of people who are in Queen tribute bands as well. So it's you want a big mix. And then what happens with these books is you start assigning things here and there, and you start filling the gaps and filling out sort of the map as it goes. And you kind of want to match up certain people with in certain places, get a little top up on stuff, get them to talk about two things. If you find they're really, really good at this, maybe hit them with a third album just as something to have in the back pocket. So it's a little bit of a chess game moving all this stuff around. And yeah, I think it makes for sort of this cool conversational, sitting around the kitchen table, drinking beers, debating your favorite albums kind of experience.
Well, so did the conversations take place? Obviously, we know Paul was on the phone, but conversations with the critics, were those in person? Were those by phone or Skype, or how did you do that?
Every single one of them was on the phone or Skype.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were having beers, you were doing it at
yeah. And I probably was having beers or gin and tonic, but and no, I mean, it looks like the two guys are talking back and forth, but it's the fact that they're all talking about the same songs, and that is why I can piece it together, and it seems like more of a conversation. But yeah, people have generally liked the format. In fact, overwhelmingly like the format, but I was a little concerned about the format, and I have seen the criticisms like, who cares what these people think, or the fact of the matter is these are not people writing these things, so it's not as crazy knowledge based, in depth, perfectly said as if you were going to be writing this stuff. So it is conversational, but the idea is this is going to get you interested to go back and listen to those albums again, look for the little sound effects or whatever, or the lyric thing or the production thing, or think about the album cover again. People have basically said, it's every time they read one of these books, it's they're back into the catalog immediately, playing it along as they read that chapter.
Oh, I love that part about the book, that it's album by album, and then there's the breakdown of the songs, and there's stories and things like that, and it's been paying more attention to Queen in the last couple of months because of the movie. I also discovered that on Alexa, I can tell Alexa to play songs by Queen, and it'll. I'm still learning how to use this stupid device, but it's kind of fun. But I'm thinking, hearing songs, looking through the book, and you're reminded of songs. I actually had most of the Queen albums from, 75 to 81 on, excuse me, folks, but a lot of them were on 8 tracks.
Cool.
So, I had them in my my 63 Ford Falcon and on the 8-track player, and they just play it over and over and over, and I wore out. I think I probably wore out Killer Queen, for example, which I think was the live album, right?
It's on the live album and on Sheer Heart Attack, right?
Right. I think it was the live album, because I was always been a big fan of live. Did having conversations with this many other critics, did you find yourself arguing about much, or were you in agreement with much, or was there anybody who kind of poked the bear a little too much?
I would definitely argue, and if there was any poking of the bear, it was probably me poking the bear a lot. But and then a lot of agreement. I mean, there's a lot of Queen albums a lot of people don't like very much, like A Kind of Magic, and Hot Space, of course, has always been a kicking thing. And Maiden Heaven, I'm not a big Maiden Heaven fan, and the two guys I talked to were very, very intelligent on the topic, and had some great things to say. And I found listening to them and just loving listening to them that I almost thought, man, it would be great to write a whole book on the Maiden Heaven album after talking to these guys, right? And I even thought, as time goes on, and you have these conversations, and unfortunately you have to cut the chapter down, but in a lot of cases I had enough for chapters that would have been twice as long, of just good, salient, awesome, good concepts, good thoughts. So yeah, I mean, there was some poking of the bear that went on, and even probably some things that got almost too negative. And I'd say, I'll put in some of this negative stuff, but not all of it. But yeah, I found myself definitely arguing with guys along the way.
And will any of the audio, like excerpts from the audio, will it find its way online? Is there a website for the books?
Never thought of that, putting audio on it. I don't know.
Wouldn't it be interesting, though, to share with people, like, some of the give and take, like, especially when you are poking the bear, so to speak? Or, I would love to hear the audio of Paul McCartney as he's driving, discussing Queen. I would just think that would be a massive success, online.
It's funny, though. I'll tell you a funny thing about Paul is that, you suggest that, and I would be scared to do that, and I think the publisher would be too. But an interesting thing happened where, Paul's in the book, of course, just like everybody else, and he's listed as one of the guys in the front when you open the pages, but he's not listed as in the book on the back cover.
I noticed that, yeah.
And the reason is that the publisher thought he's so famous that there might be some kind of like law or rule that you're not supposed to put a guy that forward as putting him on an actual front cover or back cover. Like, there was thought of like, can we put him on the front cover in some way? And nobody really thought that was a good idea. But it was basically a cautionary thing to not even list him on the back cover. They thought there might be some kind of thing where a guy's so famous that you really shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, it's funny, but that's why he was left off the back.
Well, the book publisher in me and the writer in me is like, I would have had it on the front. I would have had it on the front cover. I would have had a little thing across the top right corner, including commentary from Sir Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have hesitated. I say second edition. You go back and you fix that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the characteristics that make for a classic Queen album? What would make and I'm going to ask you after that to name like the three essential Queen albums. But what characteristics did you and the other guys you spoke to come up with that kind of solidify what makes a Queen album, essential or just better than the others?
That's a really interesting question, because when you think about it that way, you want to make sure all the ingredients are there. And all the ingredients certainly aren't there from Hot Space On, because there's not enough intricate guitar or progginess or heaviness for that matter. There's a type of heaviness, but it's not the same. It's the early heaviness is quite a bit better. So I would say that the essential ingredients would be over the top production that doesn't sound dated, production that has dated well, lots of guitar, all the guys writing, all the guys singing, except John Deacon, of course, humor, detail, action, lots and lots of action. Like, lots of songs are just so packed with so many things going on all the time. Sound effects, theatricality, heaviness, mellowness, piano, acoustic guitar. So, to answer the second part of the question, like, where do we see this or where do we hear this? You do hear this across all of the albums, except for it starts to change a little bit. Well, actually, News of the World is a little bit different, and then you skip one, and then The Game is a little bit different, and then everything past that is really different. But I would say Jazz and all the albums before News of the World have a similarity in this idea that they are very action-packed. And it's funny. I do equate News of the World a little bit to The Game in that the songs seem to have less ideas inside of each song. even though there's still a fair bit of variety across them. But jazz is really probably my favorite Queen album. It's not one that a lot of people pick as the favorite, but I love that there's a lot of short songs, there's a lot of humor, there's heaviness. It's very eccentric, from Mustafa through to things like even Let Me Entertain You, which is a heavy song, but it's a very eccentric heavy song. So I love that. Sheer Heart Attack is also quite an eccentric album. Even the debut's they're all very eccentric, but they all have a lot going on. There's this debate that goes on, like, are they a progressive metal band? Are they a progressive rock band, progressive metal band, hard rock band? You cannot categorize Queen. They just do way too many things. Are they a glam band? Superficially, they came up during the glam era and they looked kind of glammy. But other than that, forget it. I mean, they did not, they were not like Suzi Quatro and Sweet and Mud and all these people, David Essex, whatever. So yeah, I think the ingredients, just to put it in a nutshell, all four guys completely participating, doing all the things they do, duking it out for songwriting, duking it out for singing, and then just lots and lots of stuff, lots of edits, lots of things going on all the time just to keep you interested start to finish.
I as you were coming up with the characteristics, I was completely in agreement. Humor, I think people miss, is I think one of the biggest characteristics of the Queen songs. Not a lot of humor in the Rolling Stones, for example. Not general witty. There are probably a lot of in jokes amongst themselves about whatever, but a lot of humor. The theatricality, of course. A Night at the Opera, Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, it sings. That's what. And then, of course, I'm thinking, whenever there's a Brian May has got a searing solo or something it just doesn't sound like anybody else. Those were you have a much bigger list than I come up with, because you do this all the time. So speak to my 22-year-old son for a second. Give him 3 Queen albums that he absolutely should own. What should they be?
Right. So you don't want to scare him away. So you don't want to say Sheer Heart Attack, Queen 2 and Queen 1 or Night or Day at the Races or something. You don't want to have all of those in there, right? So I would say a good accessible one that still has all the things that, many Queen fans or myself love about Queen would be News of the World. Massive album. It's got the songs people know in We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, but also has one of their heaviest songs, period, in Sheer Heart Attack, and just some really great, passionate, emotional songs. It's got this cool, raw, heavy recording, but the songs are accessible. And to pick one more pretty accessible one, I'd say The Game. Because it also has some hits, it has some variety to it. It has them slowly, breaking out into other things. There's a weird rockabilly song on it. There's a disco song on it. It's got some traditional Queen, but the songs are very accessible, a little new wavy. So that's kind of an interesting one. And then I would have to pick, something that is deep into that Queen experience. Maybe something like, I was going to say Night of the Opera, but I would still say jazz. Well, no, let's go with Queen 1, because Queen 1 is it's accessible, and from a historical basis, it really does some astonishing things. Like, it's basically Led Zeppelin on steroids is one way I describe it. Like the Led Zeppelin killer. Like if everybody's out there saying how great Led Zeppelin is, and this record comes out and it's the first record by an unknown band, there is so much going on that album that it's just quite an astonishing, skillful, crafted experience. So that's one that just has kind of like a massive story about it, and people don't really appreciate it or go into the story of it. But yeah, and it's also pretty darn accessible for the most part.
Okay. And so now that we've got the albums out of the way, I'll really put you on the spot. What about 3 essential Queen songs? 3 songs you have to have.
Well, of course, we have to go with Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, because it's essentially a microcosm of a Queen album in one song. It does almost all the things you expect from Queen, from the extreme theatricality of the falsetto and things like that, to the beautiful ballad Queen, to the heavy rocking Queen, and then all the fast editing Queen stuff. So that's kind of interesting, and of course it's their most famous song, I would say. They have a lot of famous songs. I really like things like. I really love Sheer Heart Attack, even though it's a strange song. It doesn't quite fit. I mean, most of Queen's songs don't fit. They're outliers in all sorts of various ways and departments. I mean, forget about all the later albums. They have tons of stuff that doesn't fit. But this is kind of it's one of their fast ones, but it's not one of the crazy intricate fast ones that, metalheads love Queen, because when they did metal, it was like off the charts heavy, Stone Cold Crazy, Modern Time Rock and Roll, and definitely this song. And the other interesting thing about this song is it's all Roger Taylor. Like, he sings it, he plays the guitar, he plays the drums. It's written as a little bit of a riposte against punk, or whatever the word is, where they're just kind of fed up with the. It's a little bit like these punks did not put in their 10,000 hours, and how dare they take all the limelight in the UK in 1976 and 1977. So it was a little bit of that, that I feel so inarticulate, right? But it's a crazy heavy song. It's a production tour de force with those timbales in there as the fill, and the guitars are just ferocious. So I love that about it. Let's see, what else would be a pretty cool one? I love It's Late. I mean, to pick a song like a Spread Your Wings or an It's Late, or even a Play the Game. I love that part of when they do a sweeping, emotional, heavy, it's almost like gauche to call it a power ballad, because it isn't, and it's before those times. But just something like that where it's just got this groove to it. You can hear the chemistry of the band, even though they fought like cats and dogs all the time. But you can hear the chemistry of this band. It's like a loose, greasy song with and just these big cathedral vocals that open up. Just a panoramic, cool, heavy song, but also very melodic. So that to me is like the epitome of an anthemic Queen song.
And what about among their hits? Because if I ask you this question of all their music, it could go anywhere. But of their hits, what's the one song that people should be embarrassed to have in their playlist? What's the worst? What's the worst of their hits? I think I can guess, but
yeah, I have no time for Another One Bites the Dust in any way, shape, or form. I just find it completely stupid. Radio Gaga's an interesting one, and that might be the one you were thinking of.
Nope, no, not that one either. No, that's interesting though.
That one is Radio Gaga can be kind of annoying, like what the heck does Radio Gaga mean, and it doesn't start that great, etc., etc. But one thing I do like about Radio Gaga is it has interesting chord changes and melodies, and it does draw you in, and it turns out to be pretty dramatic, even though it's not a guitar song. Were you thinking of Killer Queen, perhaps?
I was not. Wow.
Crazy Little Thing Called Love?
Nope.
Wow.
Crazy. It's funny though, because Crazy Little Thing Called Love and Another One Bites the Dust, I would actually feel are essential. It's funny.
Yeah, I have no time for Crazy Little Thing Called Love either. And I certainly wouldn't use the word essential for it, because it's not indicative of anything Queen ever did. Outside of that, they have a few things that lean a little bit rockabilly-ish, but I don't like it. I don't think it's even all that great a song or ambitious, and it's so unindicative of Queen that I just feel like you could remove it and nobody would notice, sort of thing. But boy, how is it? Is it We Will Rock You?
Nope.
No, okay, because that one's also kind of annoying, right? It's interesting in that there's no bass guitar and there's this guitar going all the time, and then that incessant beat, and it's all been just drummed into us at football games and hockey games and whatnot, right?
That's true.
We Are the Champions is an okay song. I'm not crazy about it. I'm actually not too crazy about the bravado of it, and I also don't like the chord changes. I find it just a little bit too obvious. But Killer Queen, early on, what did they have? Keep Yourself Alive is a massive, awesome, cool, heavy hit.
I agree. Yeah.
So many things going on. Liars is a semi-hit. What else was a hit for these guys? You're My Best Friend.
I like that one.
Yeah. What else was a hit? Somebody to Love. I just completely love that.
Yeah,
That
same here.
also fits in that It's Late category of sweeping, awesome, epic. Just a beautiful, beautiful
Oh, and
song.
his voice in that in that song is incredible.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
Well, I'll give you a hint. They made fun of it in the movie.
Made fun of it in the movie. I didn't see the movie yet.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that okay.
And I probably won't until it's on Netflix. It's like, what is a movie theater? Really? I'm going to go to a
Oh,
movie
no, no, no,
theater
no, no.
in the winter in Toronto? Forget it.
Okay. You have to go. And Toronto has some wonderful large theaters. You got to go while it's in the theater. You have to see this movie in the theater. Don't.
Okay, so tell me, I'm dying to know, what song did they make fun of?
I'm in love with my car.
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't much of a hit at all. It was a B-side, and that's also a famous story too. Like he made a lot of money because that was the B-side to Bohemian Rhapsody, I believe, right? But interesting song. I love his voice. It's a good heavy song. It's just a humorous song. It's a clever song that's humorous at the same time. It's heavy. It's like I say, I love his voice. It's not a song I would make fun of that much, but I understand why they would make fun of it because yeah, there was a bit of a war over putting that song in the album because it was seen to be as a little bit flippant, right?
Right. And the thing it's funny. I remember the song. I guess where I was growing up in New Jersey and New York, I remember hearing it on the radio a lot. And being in high school at the time, it was exactly. And you haven't seen the film, so I don't want to give away too much. But it's portrayed in the film as it should be a single because it's the kind of thing that high school kids want to hear in their cars and bang their heads while they're playing it. And that's exactly what I remember. I remember being in the car with friends all the time, and that would come on, and everybody'd be like, I'm in love with my car. And you open the windows, and same thing with Bohemian Rhapsody, completely different song, completely different quality of it. But now so I've gone back, I hadn't heard that probably in decades, and after seeing the movie, and they don't play the song in the movie, and I had to go back and find it and listen to it again. And I went, yeah, I can see why I liked that in high school, but oh my God, it does not hold up. It is not. It should not be part of the Queen canon in any way. But
yeah, it's funny that one too. That record when it was heavy, the production was a little bit eccentric, a little bit thin on it. They like that's one that's a little bit like Sheer Heart Attack. Now that I think of it, where they kind of really smear all the guitars and everything together. It's a dirty, grungy sound that they get on that, which goes great with Roger's voice. What a great singer he is, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I love Freddie's voice and what he can do with his voice. I love Brian's voice, less so what he can do with it because he's a little bit fragile and not the trained singer. But my favorite singer is probably Roger Taylor in the band because he can do great things with his voice and he has what I find to be the coolest voice. In the band. I just love that, Rod Stewart, vocal fry that he gets in his voice.
Interesting. All right. Well, I had to ask you about that because I can't. And now that song is, I think, what we call an earworm. It won't go away, and that's not a compliment. It's like once you hear it again, it's like, oh, get out of my head, stupid song.
Yeah.
Were there any of these albums that you had not been terribly familiar with that you had to refamiliarize yourself with before launching into the conversations, or were you pretty much up on all of your Queen?
Yeah, this is a band that I find that I played a lot over the years, and there aren't so many albums that I wasn't familiar with them very much. So no, that's not a problem. The not being familiar with them was not the problem, because there are quite a few Queen albums I don't like very much. I didn't play them a lot, but coincidentally or lining up, the fact the albums I didn't like very much are so simple that it's so easy to just earworm them into your head and you don't even need to hear them. I mean, there's some awful stuff on A Kind of Magic and The Miracle and things like that are just so simple that you don't even need to hear them that many times. So no, there weren't that many that I wasn't familiar with. And credit to the guys. I mean, even the albums that you don't like very much, they're all so different from each other that it's pretty easy to to slot. Like you're never going to forget really in a big way what songs are on what album, because they all blend together, because they definitely don't. All the records are just so different from each other. It's pretty easy with Queen to master them, right?
And Martin, I was so eager to get into the conversation about Queen. Didn't really talk about your background in all this. Can you take a minute and tell people, for example, how many record albums have you reviewed over the years, and how long have you been at this?
Yeah, I haven't really been at this very long. I mean, I
Hmm.
did my first book of record reviews as a self-published book back in 1993, and that's when I started. But having said that, I now have, I have apparently written more record reviews than anybody in the history of mankind at around 9,000, I think it
Oh
is.
my God.
8,000, 9,000. But anyways, one of my publishers kind of looked into it, and nobody's written more record reviews, that are in a published place or even probably not in a published place. So across a whole bunch of different books and a few in magazines, but literally of those 9,000, over 7,000 are actually in books.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've written 80 books, 80 music
Oh
books.
my God.
And a lot of stuff, worked on a lot of different magazines, so a lot of magazine articles along the way, and liner notes and bios for bands and stuff. But my main job really is cranking out these books. So people think I do it really fast, and I suppose I do, and I am a fast writer, but I'm one of the few where it really is my main job. And a lot of that is by being forcefully unemployed by a rapidly evolving music journalism business where there's not, good paying magazine jobs, print magazine, internet, whatever. So the book thing is something I can control, I can do a lot of, and it's really now to the point where it's 90% doing books. So that's why I can crank them out. And I actually counted because I was sort of checking my bibliography for this long story, this rights thing that you got to do. But I've done 30 books in the last 3 years, so I've averaged 10 a year.
Wow.
And I don't see really that changing. Knock wood, providing I don't die. I can see getting 10 out next year too.
That's amazing. I mean, I take it from somebody. I've got 16 books out under my name, but most of them are memoirs or co-authored and things like that, and they take a year to year and a half. So I've always felt like that was a pretty good production for over 20 years. But 80 books, I mean, oh my God, I salute you. That's awesome.
Some of those recently are repurposing things that went out of print, and I'm
Sure.
expanding them, and but greatly expanding them. There's very few that I'm not going back, and the reason I'm able to do this is because of all that magazine work. I do a lot of interviews like yourself. I've done 1,600 interviews, and I've got a cache of all this talk because I don't want to write a book on a band. I used to say I've got to talk to them at least 25 times before I do a book on them. So I want to have something to bring to the table in terms of lots of dialogue. So yeah, having all that helps you, make a full length book by having a lot of interviews.
So what bands are next in the album by album series? Do you know at this point?
Well, there probably won't be any more because
What?
this publisher who's put out all these gorgeous books is
Yeah.
closing down their music book division. So there's going to be much less coming. It's a big company and it's only part of what they do. But, unless something changes, there won't be any. So I haven't had a deal to do a new one of these for well over a year. So Queen was the last one in the hopper. So that's 5 of those. But having said that, I've talked to buddies where we've talked about because we've gotten so into having these conversations about these albums. I could almost see self-publishing some or doing some on a lower scale and not, with the same, we've talked about doing Kate Bush, Porcupine Tree, Roger Waters and David Gilmour, just those 8 albums, Robert Plant catalog, like catalogs that are not nearly as huge as these catalogs and as famous. So I could see, I would love to crank out 5 of these a year, but on more of a lower scale basis, smaller bands kind of thing. So, and also having said that, maybe Voyager, there's always rumors going on about what they're going to do, but they just may come back.
I would think that the writing part is sort of the easier part, but the production and of the books and the art and the color and the graphics that they put in is probably the killer part of producing these books. I would think it'd be relatively. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to undermine your work, but the writing part is probably the easier part of getting these books done. It's the production that's probably the killer in terms of time and.
Yeah. And it was great because I wasn't tasked with doing any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, great design. They go get all the photos. They've got the deals with the photo agencies and whatnot. They find all that stuff. Dennis Pernew over there, he's been just awesome to work with, because he takes this really seriously, and he's such a big fan himself that, when I see the layouts for the first time, I'm just constantly blown away. Two others that I did there were a different format. Led Zeppelin, all the albums, all the songs. The Clash, all the albums, all the songs. That was just straight me writing 400, 500 words on every single song by these bands. So that was like a monastic, you're yourself sitting on your mountain, writing this super heavy, intense stuff the whole time. But again, same thing. I'd open it up and I'd go, the Zeppelin one, this was what made me think of this. I remember looking at the Zeppelin one going, I swear, over half of these pictures, I've never seen these pictures before. I don't know where they came from. It's just unbelievable. So
I was hoping that maybe there was a cheap trick book in your future. I'd love to read that.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, Robert Lawson, wrote one, and it's really cool. And obviously there was the long out of print one that was done years ago. And I've thought about it over the years, but no, now that Robert's done one, it'll serve. I've had a few interviews with those guys over the years, but I just can't see ever expanding anything into book form on them.
Well, before we let you go, the advantage of doing these video interviews is we see this great background behind you, books and DVDs and albums. Anything you want to? Now I know there's a shelf right at just at the shoulder level with you. That's just your books, right? There's a shelf that's got mostly your titles on it.
Yeah, so related to this situation, so that's what the AC/DC album by album looks like, and that's what the Pink Floyd album by album looks like. And then this is the Zeppelin I was talking about. So that was the original version, and then they did an expanded version where we added 16 pages of 16 rarities to it. But yeah, so this is just my stuff here.
Any interesting personal souvenirs or memorabilia that you have at your desk or in the area that you want to share?
Well, just out of eye shot here, I actually have a little Queen shrine, because about 15 years ago I went down to Niagara Falls and on a whim paid a guy $1,000 for his Queen collection. So I bought all this cool Queen stuff and I made a little shrine. And you were talking about 8-tracks earlier. Above the Queen shrine, I've got an 8-track shrine.
Oh my goodness!
Just like a little display of some sealed 8-tracks. But yeah, there's 2 nice shelves of Queen over there.
At the risk of losing our image, but can you turn your computer slightly so we can maybe get a glimpse?
I doubt that's going to work, because it's way off to the side and the glass is going to glare on it.
Oh, okay.
What else can I show you? Is there anything really close by? Yeah, hang on. I'm going to show you a couple cool little items here.
All right.
So we've got the... So we've got the... this was a present to me, a signed Misfits... skull thing. We've got some Van Halen panties.
Wait, what panties were those?
Van
Halen panties. All right.
Spankin' panties. Yeah.
Spankin' panties. Awesome.
We've got. This is kind of cool. So this is from. I went to a Rush Hemispheres listening party for the reissue, and this is the Toasted to the Heart little cereal box. It's a Rush themed cereal box that they were handing out. This is cool. You're not going to see one of these too often. A Pat Travers hat.
Wow. By the way, was that supposed to be Geddy Lee on the back of the cereal box?
Let's see. On the back, what do we have here? It looks like all the guys in a little put together thing.
Oh, okay. I got it.
So yeah, please recycle. What else we got here? Ingredients: Puppets Rock Flour Blend, Pert's Groove, Dragons, Bangkok Herbs, Black Smith Peppers, Artist Chicken, Corn Riffs, Getty Strings, Gibson Vitamins Powder. It contains 2% or less of partially prog rock oil, Lifes and Seeds, Bricks, Whales, all that stuff.
And I got to ask you, was the Van Halen panties, were those from the David Lee Roth era or from the Sammy Hagar era?
No, that would be related to the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge album. And actually, in my bathroom, I've got another thing from that hung up on a wall. They sent out promotional Van Halen pound cake. So it's because of that album, right? Yeah. So it's a tin with pound cake on the top, like a little Chinese food container situation. Yeah. So
well, I'm going to use that opportunity to point out to folks who don't know. If you go into the Mr. Media archives, there is an interview with Lisa Roth, David Lee's sister.
Oh, that's crazy!
Yeah,
wow.
So we had a wonderful conversation. She loves her brother, and we talked because she has a company that she created where they license rock and roll hits by all kinds of artists, and then they convert them into baby music. It's
Cool.
all instrumentals, and so everything you can imagine, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Van Halen to
Nice.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So no, I've got an office here that's basically filled with all this stuff. I've bought memorabilia from all over the place. I've got gold record awards and stuff that, I didn't do anything to earn them. I just But little display cases all over, and backstage passes. I wrote a book on backstage passes, and I was paid in backstage passes. So I have 1,000 cool backstage passes in here. And what I like to do is, when I meet these bands, I'm quite an autograph hound with them, so I get them to sign my records. So I've got all these framed records all over the place, probably a couple hundred of those things. 3,200 signed items in this office, but displayed probably a couple hundred, just records up all on the walls and stuff. So yeah.
Right. Well, next time I get to Toronto, I want to see your office in person.
Cool. Yeah.
That would be awesome. Well, folks, listen. You can find Martin Popoff's new book, Queen, album by album, in great stores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. You know how this works. If you are watching on MrMedia.com, below the video, you'll see the album cover. Click on it. It'll take you to Amazon. You can order it immediately there, and they can probably get it to you by drone in 30 minutes or less. Oh, no, maybe I'm confusing them with the pizza company. Maybe give them a day. But you can get it that way. Is the book available as an ebook or strictly paper?
No, it's not an ebook, I don't think, and I don't think it's going to be an ebook because of what we talked about earlier with them closing down that music book division. And that's also caused some big problems with a lot of these books going out of print, like The Clash, no more, the AC/DC, no more, Rush Illustrated History, no more. And I ran into a big thing with the Maiden and the Queen where I tried to buy some to sell, and they were all gone before I could even get them. So you're right about it being at Amazon. But because it's all at Amazon and all the bookstores took them, I can't get any. So I literally don't have any to sell myself, because at my site, I sign and ship tons of books. That's actually the main part of my business, is selling my own books. And that happens at my site. But the Queen one, I can't fill those orders.
Wow, that's brutal. All right. And Martin, do you have a website yourself? Or
Yes. It is martinpopoff.com.
Okay.
And there's full descriptions of all the books. There's PayPal Buy Now buttons for America, International, Canada. I sign them, ship them off from the office here. And of those 80 books, I would say there's full page descriptions, and they're available for about 50 of them, I'd say.
Okay, great. And what about Twitter, Facebook, social media? Can people find you there?
I'm not great on Twitter. I don't have Instagram. I'm pretty good with my Facebook. I've always been pretty good with Facebook, so I'm definitely findable as a public person type page and a regular type page and a couple other pages that people have done for me. So.
All right, very good. Well, Martin Popoff, delightful to talk to you. I think we went on quite a bit longer than planned, but it was fascinating. Great stories. Great book. You got to go see this movie in theaters, Martin. I'm telling you, you will be disappointed if you only see it on a TV screen, because it is.
It creeps me out a little seeing guys playing other guys, though. I mean, even to the point where I don't like seeing Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer in Peters and Ace's makeup either. It's just weird to me, right? Biopics are a strange thing. I don't know, but of course,
this is unique onto those things. It's funny because there's a preview, at least what we saw. There's a preview for Elton John's Rocket Man, a trailer, and I just thought, even before I saw it, and I've seen Bohemian Rhapsody now twice in the last 2 weeks, there's no way that Elton John movie is going to come anywhere close to this movie. And you'll see it, and I think you'll understand why. It's just, it may not win any, best film of the year, but in terms of being a film about a rock band, and making you feel like you knew something about them. And also, the guy who plays Brian May, and I don't know the actor's name, I kept thinking I was actually watching Brian May. It was amazing. And he's the actor. I don't know if Brian is as charismatic as this actor is, but it was, he was a strong second to Rami Malek in keeping you riveted on the screen. Anyway, Martin Popoff, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Media, today.
Yes, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
to believe her. A bad idea to believe her. Turn up the stereo receiver.